Summers. Good night. I have been a fan, personally, I have been a fan of Miss Summers since I first devoured her iconic book, which is called Designing Gardens with Flora of the American East. It's been recently revised, but I have the original version. It's very marked up. And she was one of the very first speakers of this chapter right after the chapter was formed in 2013. So I'm really, really, really pleased to have her back again. Ms. Summers currently is an adjunct professor at Westchester Community College in the Native Plant Center's Go Native U certificate program. And she and her husband have recently opened their country home, Flying Trillium Gardens and Preserve, for public tours, so that all of us can be inspired by the beauty that she has created there. And with no further ado, Carolyn, please, and thank you for coming.
Thank you all for being here. It's great to see a crowd, sort of see. I can imagine the crowd, okay. So this program is called Keystone Plans to Restore.
Sorry, one more thing, please, if you have questions, please type them into the chat.
Right.
I always forget to say that. Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. So, without further ado, let's get started. This color green makes us all feel calm and peaceful, right? And we all always think that green is good, but if you all look closely to this photograph, I think you can probably all tell that these greens are not so good. And mostly what you're seeing here is invasive species that have taken over what was once a beautiful forest, and the understory had been lots of bloodroot, and now what we see is mostly multiflora rose. And so green can be deceiving a little bit. But the bottom line is that some plants are just more important than others. And we all know that the milkweed plants are most important because of our monarch butterflies. Even children know that now. But the truth is that most species of Lepidoptera, which are the butterflies and the moths, they rely for reproduction on host plants, the plants that feed their caterpillars. Most of you on this webinar probably know most of this, what I'm about to say for the first chunk of this, but I feel like I need to just make sure that everybody is on the same page with this. So bear with me, those of you who already know what host plants are. I'm going to try to go through this quickly. So to survive the plant's chemical warfare system, the insects evolved the ability to tolerate one or a few toxic plant chemicals. And that was that's how host plant specialization came about. And this occurred over millennia as plants and insects co-evolved. Thus, only plants that share an evolutionary history with insects can provide food for the caterpillars and bees that are what we call host plant specialists. Now, the short version of that is plants don't want to be eaten, so they develop toxic chemicals in their leaves for protection. So it all comes down to the leaves, right? The leaves of native plants form the basis of the food web. Here's some hickory tussock moths taking away the birch leaves in prompt fashion. Our federally endangered Carner blue butterfly requires eastern lupin to reproduce. I say our because we have a very nice population here in New York State in the Albany Pine Barrens of the federally endangered Carner blue butterfly. The population there is doing so well that they're actually able to send some to New Hampshire for another reintroduction program. The fact is that New Hampshire and Maine and some of these other states lost the native eastern lupins when they were overrun by the invasive western lupin. So even plants from western United States can actually be invasive in our part of the United States. And so eastern lupin is the only plant that these particular Carner blue butterflies can reproduce on. Now, a monarch butterfly is in fact much better off because there are several species in the genus of milkweeds that they can use. But for the Carner blue, they can't use any other lupin. So that's some real specialization. Anyway, it turns out 90% or more of native insects have evolved these specialized relationships with native plants. Caterpillars, of course, are key to food webs. They do more than any other insect to transfer the energy from the sun from plants to the animals. And as it turns out, 96% or so of baby birds require insect protein to grow and to fledge out of the nests. They're not eating seeds and berries at this stage of their life. So some 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars are needed to fledge one family of chickadees. And this is, of course, these are rough estimates, but you can imagine if a small chickadee needs that many caterpillars, how many caterpillars would be needed to fledge a nest full of robins? It's quite amazing. And the parent birds are still feeding their nestlings even once they're out of the nest. You'll still see them going to feed the small birds that are hiding in the trees, and just as soon as they've fledged, they're not still quite able to hunt for themselves. And even hummingbirds feed tiny insects to their young. Now, during migration season, our neotropical migrants are coming north. What are they finding to feed themselves with? Now, there may be some seeds left. There may be some berries hanging on, some shriveled berries hanging on, but mostly what they're looking for those early rising insects that are also just waking up and are looking for anything blossoms to eat. So any kind of tree that's in flower, they're going to be full of insects, and that's where the birds are going to go. They're going to go to the native trees that have the native insects in them. So we're looking, I'm sure all of you have seen these horrible headlines, something like 3 billion birds gone since 1970. Analysis done by Dr. Douglas Ptolemy shows that the species that raise young on insects were the most affected compared with other bird species. And this is a photograph of bobolinks, which really depend on meadows and fields, and they are considered one of the most vulnerable species. So what can we do to reverse some of these terrible trends? We can use plants that are beautiful. We all want beautiful plants in our gardens, but that also provide ecological services. So the new message that's coming out from lots of Dr. Ptolemy's work and some of his students who've gone on to do wonderful things. The new sort of method here is to strive for 70% native trees and shrubs, which actually, when you think about it, that gives you a lot of room to play. And especially with the trees. So the trees are, it turns out, really, truly key. They provide critical wildlife food and habitat as follows: 60 to 70% of lepidopterans, again, those are the butterflies and the moths, 33% of bees, 30 to 35% of songbirds, meaning mostly our vireos and our warblers and some others. And then post-fledging, the numbers rise to 70 to 80%. A lot of these numbers come from Desiree Naranga, who also studied with Dr. Ptolemy, and she's been doing a lot of really amazing work. And she's crunched some of these numbers, and it turns out that even the songbirds who might be breeding in the meadows, once their babies are able to fly, they take them into the forest. So again, the forests and the trees are very, very important. Now we all know that all trees remove air pollutants, they transpire and cool the air, they prevent and control flooding and erosion. So, but it's only our native trees that do those other things for the habitat. So the question comes up, how can we get more trees into our landscapes? Well, we can reduce the size of our lawns. Most of us, maybe not most of us, but a lot of people still have big lawns and they could be made smaller. We can remove invasive species and make more room for the trees that we need to have. We can use keystone plants, and I will be talking in more detail about that. We can create soft landings and protect leaf litter. Now, what are soft landings? So soft landings, that term was actually coined by Heather Holm, and I hope some of you are familiar with her work. She's written amazing identification books for insects and basically manuals that tell you which trees go with which insects will need which plants, and her book is just a wealth of information. We also need to reduce light pollution and eliminate or drastically reduce pesticide use. Well, it's human nature to focus on the showy flowers, and a lot of us do that with our pollinator gardens, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I want to just, this time around, I'm going to focus us on leaves. So a keystone plant is one whose leaves support the larvae of many species of butterflies, moths, and other insects, and thus underpin the entire food web. Trees and shrubs far outweigh perennials in that respect. Doesn't mean we're going to ignore the perennials, but I just want to emphasize once again the importance of our woody species. So our top 5 keystone plants: oaks, cherries, willows, birches, and maples. And I think probably most of you are familiar with the concept. I think the message is getting out there now that oaks are really the best. Oaks rule. But we can't forget our native conifers. Our pines, spruces, and junipers host over 400 species of butterflies and moths. Here's a juniper geometer that's eating the needles of that juniper. And of course, I can't do a program without showing cedar waxwings. I just love them too much. All right, oaks. We know they support more than 550 species of insects. We all know that, right? Yay. All right. But some people think that oaks take too long to grow. So I'm going to show you a couple of pictures and hope that that maybe will change your mind. So this one was approximately 15 years old when it was in this picture, but it was actually planted in 2004. And in 2021, that's what it looked like. So less than 20 years to get to be a pretty massive full-size tree. So you know, those 20 years go by really fast. You'd be surprised. All right. But if you don't have room for a really large, that was a red oak, maybe you need to have a small grove of dwarf chinkapin oaks. So here's a grove of these trees. These are oak trees. They will probably top out at 20 feet if they get that, if they even get that high. They have tiny leaves and tiny little acorns, and they're really adorable. So if you think that your yard will not support an oak, think again. You may be able to find one of these dwarf chinkapin oaks. Not if you have a swamp, though, because they really like well-drained soil. So here are some of the oak eaters that I've been able to find and photograph. This one's kind of pretty. Actually, they're all kind of pretty. Some of them are just weird looking, like this red-humped oakworm. And this is called the laugher. They have weird names too. American dagger. This is the variable oak leaf caterpillar, and it is indeed variable, as you will see from this variable oak leaf caterpillar. And isn't that a gorgeous thing? That is a spiny oak slug moth. Now this is special. So this is a Promethea moth cocoon, and you will find these. They kind of dangle down from the branches. And this actually gets back to what I said before about soft landings. So the point of a soft landings is that the leaves, when the tree loses its leaves in the fall, it's going to lose a lot more than just the leaves. It's going to lose insect larvae and sacs and cocoons and reproductive agents that are going to fall to the ground and be part of what we call leaf litter. Well, it's not really litter, is it? So it's really a carpet. And if you have a grove of trees, and if you have plants underneath the trees that are all, very pretty plants, and the leaves fall, you can just leave them there. There's no mowing underneath your trees. That's what we're trying to get away from. Leave the leaves, let it make a nice soft landing place for these types of cocoons. So this is a male Promethea moth, and that's, you can see in back of it, that's that same cocoon shape. It basically is a leaf that's just curled around itself. And this is the female. Most of these are one of the large silk moths. We have several species of beautiful large silk moths. And for those of you who've never had the privilege of seeing one, they're huge. They're about the size of a small sparrow, about anywhere from 5 to 6 inches in width. And these particular ones, the Promethea, you can tell the male and female apart. The others look just the same in pattern-wise, but the males are black and the females are this beautiful red, different tints of reddish colors, reddish brown. This is a different silk moth. This is the caterpillar of the Polyphemus silk moth. And these are Cecropia moths. Many of you the Cecropia is pretty well known. Cecropias are the biggest. They're the ones that get to be 6 inches wide. And if you look to the bottom underneath of the lower of the Cecropias, you can see the sac that it came out of. So that was the cocoon, and inside the cocoon was a female. And so the female is the one on the lower, and then the males came because it was sitting on top of our porch. And so there were 4 males that came to our porch, and only this one got to be lucky enough to be able to reproduce with the female. Here's a close-up. And this moth needs no introduction. I think everybody is familiar with our beautiful Luna moth. Now here's the funny little Luna moth cocoon, and you can see that little cocoon in the little pot. I picked that up off in a path. I was lucky to see it. I looked down and I thought, all right, is that dog due, or is that something I want to pick up? So I picked it up and carried it back to the porch. And as I was carrying it back to the porch, it started to move in my hand. It was like little shaking going on. So I looked it up, and sure enough, that's what Luna moths do for some reason. It was an interesting phenomenon. I took it back to the porch, and a few days later, it closed. In other words, it came out of its cocoon and was hanging on a box that was on the porch. Now, I was lucky to see that, but you could see there's no way you would see that if you were like mowing your lawn or something, how easy it would be to just kill that, to just either step on it. That's why having a soft landing area is a really wonderful thing and useful to have. Now, when we talk about 550, I mean, of course, all of these numbers are subject to exactly where do you live and where do these insects go. So there's no magic to that. They're not exact numbers, but those numbers refer specifically to Lepidoptera, which are only moths and butterflies. So the numbers are actually much, much larger once you start looking at things like sawflies, which is what I'm showing here in this photograph. So these are slug oak sawflies. This is a different kind of sawfly larva. There are actually many, many kinds of things that use oak trees besides moths and butterflies. These are insects too. So these are oak galls, and there's a stink bug on one of them. This funny looking brown sort of looks like a brown berry or something. That's another gall, a type of oak gall. All right, well, now we're into the willows. The willows are another one of our keystone plants supporting 484 or thereabouts species of Lepidoptera. The one I'm showing here is the peach leaf willow. It's a very, very nice willow if you can find it. I believe you can get them from Prairie Moon Nursery still. I think they still sell the roots. but willows are not that easy. The native willows are not that easy to find in the trade, except for pussy willows, black willows sometimes, but they get huge. This peach leaf willow is a nice sized tree for a yard. And here is a willow pine cone gall. And the first time I saw that, I was like, what on earth? But it's, I looked it up. That's a willow pine cone gall because they do sort of look like pine cones. All right, the next keystone genus is Prunus, and those are the plums and cherries. Our native plums and cherries support at least 455 species of Lepidoptera. And here we have Angus's Daytona ministra. Pretty little guy hanging in there. And here's a hungry baby hoping that caterpillar will wind up in its mouth. It's sitting in the same tree, hoping for a snack from its parents. It looks like it only fledged a little while ago. Another very common one that we're all familiar with is fall webworm, also known as the tent caterpillar. Now, the ones that come in the fall especially are an absolute gift to migrating songbirds. And of course, people tend to like yank them out of trees and think that they're harming the trees. But especially in the fall, the leaves are going to fall anyway. So leave the fall webworms. I mean, if it's in the spring and you have a tree that you just planted and it's full of tent caterpillars, you might want to move the tent caterpillars to a bigger tree. But all in all, these are native caterpillars, and our trees have evolved to accept them and to deal with them. So I'm going to show you, can you see the Phoebe in the lower right sitting on top of the web? So this is good eating. And these yellow-billed cuckoos, I'm told, find these to be absolutely irresistible. So if you would like to attract a yellow-billed cuckoo to your garden, this is one way to do it. And this is how pretty they are. When you see them individually crawling around on leaves and such, they're absolutely gorgeous. So if you don't have room for a black cherry, and many of us do not, choke cherries are a wonderful substitute, as are beach plums and many, many other smaller plums and cherries that are native to our region. Now we're into the birches. So I put this river birch photograph specifically to remind myself to mention that this is not an understory tree. And I often see it planted in landscapes as if it were an understory tree. Just a warning, river birches are full-size trees, and they grow pretty fast. So here's a tufted Thyatiran moth on this birch tree here. And here is a fingered dagger moth. Our birches support 410 species, and they are also considered to be keystone species. There are yellow birches, and there are black birches, and there are, of course, our favorite white bark birch. But the paper bark birches are actually happier further north. And the black and yellow birches are also considered more of a forest tree, and they're not readily available in the trade. But the gray birch would be happy around here, and also, of course, the river birch. Maples, we all know maples. Maples sustain 295 species of Lepidoptera. So here is a maple looper moth. And this is the lesser maple spanworm. Okay, now we're into some elms. Elms are also, they're not quite up there with the with the oaks and the plums, but these probably, I think they're around 210. We'll get to that in a minute. Disease-resistant elms have saved us really because we weren't able to plant them for a long time because of Dutch elm disease. But I've been planting many of the different newer cultivars, and they've done really, really well for me. And I'm starting to get that wonderful sort of cathedral look that the elms were so famous for in my young elms here. And this double-toothed prominent is mimicking the edge of the elm leaf. It's an amazing adaptation for camouflage. Here's another look at that. And you can see it's just trying to disappear into the edge of the leaf and become unnoticed. Yeah, so over 200 butterflies and moths are supported by the elms. This one is a question mark butterfly larva. And this is a close-up. When you look at it close up, it's almost scary looking, isn't it? I mean, it's beautiful. It's an amazing creature, but it looks quite sharp, and I wouldn't want to try to pick it up. This is what the beautiful butterfly looks like. All right, so flowering dogwood. We can't just have overstory trees. We also need some understory trees, and flowering ones, of course, are just wonderful. So our dogwood provides for 129 species, which is not bad. There's a unicorn caterpillar, a giant leopard moth, a red humped caterpillar, and of course, berries for the birds. Dogwoods are great for that. Really good, really important migratory bird food. All right, Amelanchier or Juneberry hosts 124 species, not bad. So here's another, this one is the Shadbush Amelanchier cross grandiflora. This is Autumn Brilliance. This one is very popular in the trade and should have no trouble finding these. And what is this Cape May warbler looking for? It's not eating the flowers. No, it's looking for those little tiny little insects that are trying to find nectar in these early blooming Juneberries. And here we have an elegant tailed slug moth. This is later in the season. And a fragile dagger moth caterpillar. All of these are eating the amelanchiers. Sawfly larva. So this is up over and above the 120 whatever species we were talking about before, because the sawfly larva was not included in that number. So we're already over and above. And here's another, a different sawfly larva also eating amelanchier. And what's this crazy looking thing? Looks like a claw is coming out of that leaf, and it's another gall. And here are these funny looking, they almost look like little nuts growing out of the leaf. This is a different kind of gall. And of course, I can't resist. There's the cedar waxwings chowing down on the Juneberries. Okay, hollies support 45 species. So here's an inkberry hedge, and you might say to yourself, well, it's very nice that you're using native plants there, but what's the point? Because there's no, if you're shearing it like that, then there's no flowers and there's no fruit. But again, emphasis on the leaves. So it's still supporting pawpaw sphinx on inkberry and many, many others. Here's another example of that same idea. This is not a privet hedge. This is common ninebark. Most people, if they thought about it at all, would think it was an ordinary privet hedge, but it's actually much more important than that. Now, it is a shame that we have sheared off the flowers and nothing for the pollinators, but remember the point being that there are insects that are going to be using the leaves, like this insect here, this unicorn caterpillar. Now, one of the most, the least favorite, I guess, of our native plants is the Annabelle hydrangea. Everybody says, oh, useless plant, useless Annabelle hydrangea, because they think it's sterile. And it is certainly, it's not entirely sterile, but it certainly doesn't have a lot of nectar, although you can see this red spotted purple is determined to find something. But again, look, it's the leaves. The leaves are so important. This is the hydrangea leaf tire moth larval pouch, and these pouches are everywhere. Now, of course, if you want something that's a little more fruitful and you want to have the Hydrangea arborescens Haas halo, this is a great plant. This is the one that Mount Cuba says did the best in terms of pollinators. So you can have both. You can have the pollinator activity too. And of course, those leaves will also perform the same function for the leaf tire moth. So blueberries, now that we're into the shrubs, the blueberries are one of the best. Blueberries are host plants for at least 295 species of Lepidoptera. That's a lot. Were you planning to eat those blueberries? These are the contracted Daytona, and they think they may have beat you to it. And this is Drexel's Daytona. There's lots of Daytonas out there. Native viburnums support 115 species of Lepidoptera. That's also a lot. And we have a lot of different types of viburnums. We have arrowwood. We have, this one here is cassia. And this is, this is a neotropical migrant waiting for the berries to ripen. No, I don't think so. I think it's probably out there looking for looking for the larvae and the other insects that they might find on that arrowwood shrub. All right, well, we've spent a lot of time with the woodies, but I said we wouldn't ignore the perennials. So of all the perennials, flowers in the aster family, the composites, support the most insects. But before we get to that, let's start in spring. What's going on here? These are sessile bellwort, which is a nice little spring ephemeral. Actually, it's not totally ephemeral, I don't think. I think it stays up for a while. But anyway, this one, if you look closely, especially look right to the middle of the photograph, it's tattered. Something is already eating it. Even the trilliums are getting eaten. Even the trillium flowers are getting eaten. So in this, now this is actually the other end of the season. This is when when the seed pods are ripening. You can see, if you look closely in the middle of that photograph, you can see the striped back moth caterpillar. All right, so now we're back into the composites. The pearly everlasting is one of my favorite plants because I can almost always find a nest for the American lady. And there's an early instar American lady on pearly everlasting, also known as Anaphyllus margaretacea. And there's a later instar. This one has really pretty colors. They are very variable. They can be black and white, or they can be sort of colored like this. And here's a black and yellow one on pussy toes. Pussy toes is the second host plant for these guys. Harris's checker spot. This is an interesting one because this, like the one we talked about earlier, this is the only host plant they can use. So Harris's checker spot can only use tall white aster. The Carner blue is what I was trying to think of. So these, like Carner blue, if they don't have this particular aster, then you don't have this particular butterfly. And they have they come out in large groups like this. And the book that I consulted, or the website, I don't remember anymore, that I consulted, said they often eat themselves literally out of house and home. Anyway, this is what they look like when they're adults. They're very, very pretty. Well, of course, goldenrods themselves host many, many species, and this is the hooded owlet. Outlet. And here's the brown hooded owlet on goldenrod. Yellow bear on ironweed, another composite. And here's the owlet again on aster this time. Here's another giant leopard moth. This one's on the heath aster. This woolly bear climbed this particular liatris grew very, very tall. It's more than, it's probably close to 3 feet tall. And he climbed all the way up there, or she climbed all the way up there. But there she is. And here she is again, climbing the hyssop-leaved boneset. And this is Lecontes haploa on Joe Pye's flower. Tall meadow rue, another beautiful, beautiful flower that we don't have enough of. Likes kind of wet feet, but will grow in ordinary garden soil, statuesque, lots of cloudy white flowers. And this is the Canadian owlet that likes tall meadow rue. Angelica purpurea. Now this is now we're in the dill, not the dill family, whatever you call it, the carrot family. Let's call it the carrot family. So Angelica purpurea supports all of these different ones. Black swallowtail. This is an early instar. There's the later version, black swallowtail, growing up fast. And here we have a black swallowtail on Zizia aurea, which is also in the carrot family. And who knew that even mints, even the mint family, can provide leaf nourishment for a sphinx, a hermit sphinx in this case. And hitched arches is on the baptisia. So all of these different perennials provide for the numbers that we saw earlier with the numbers of butterflies and moths. Those are all different butterflies and moths, but here again, it's even more insects than that, because these funny looking, not flowers, but these sort of floppy double-leaved plants in the foreground there, those are goldenrod galls, like the galls that we saw earlier on the leaves. This is a different form of gall. It makes lots and lots of little leaves at the top of the plant. That's one form. And then there's this form. And I'm sure we're all of you are familiar with this. This is a very common gall. It makes a bulge in the stem of the goldenrods. So it looks sort of like the goldenrod ate something and it got stuck. So what we're really looking at here is frozen food for the birds. That's great wintertime food for the birds, because the birds know that deep inside those funny looking little bulges on the stems are insect larvae, which is absolutely wonderful food for them in the middle of winter when they're hungry. To have something like that is just, a prize. So I'm going to anticipate some of the questions I'm going to get. And I know I'm going to get questions about purple leaves. So let's dive right in. Should we avoid purple leaves? I am going to show you, all I can do is show you what I'm seeing. And I am not seeing a reason to avoid purple leaves. I know there's been one study. I'm familiar with the study. I read the whole thing. I had already, of course, planted a few purple leaved trees here and there, as like a little bit of spice here and there. So I had some, fairly large ones to look at. And I had been looking anyway, because when I see an insect or a caterpillar or something, I want to take a picture of it. So I have lots of pictures going back a ways. So here's a unicorn on my purple leafed redbud. There's a geometer moth caterpillar on the same. You can see it, if you look closely, it's on the stem. It's right smack in the middle of the photograph. Blackberry looper, I think. Some of these are, most of them I'm pretty sure of. American dagger moth. Red humped caterpillar. Here's a white marked tussock moth on my hybrid coral bell. This is the tufted thiatirid on the Physocarpus common ninebark diabolo, which many of you may be familiar with, although I think that one is probably not even in circulation anymore. That's an old cultivar. Here's the checkered fringed prominent. What a cool looking cat. Hickory tussock moth. Now we're into this year. So every year, there's usually one tree or one kind of phenomenon that sort of makes it for that year. And this was the year of the red-leaved cherry. And I'm just going to go through, this was one tree and one period of time that we just had a lot of different things happening in this one tree. Couldn't tell you why. Red-crossed button slug moth. Some of these, I think most of these I had never seen before. The small-eyed sphinx. Here's a sawfly. Banded tussock moth, we have lots of those. But this was the best. This is the prettiest caterpillar I have ever seen. This is the crowned slug moth. So another question I often get, should we avoid using plants from farther south? Well, like all of these questions, it depends. But for me, the true test is, well, is anything using it? So this is a honey locust, which technically is not native to New York State per se, but there's the unicorn caterpillar. And actually that unicorn caterpillar is also showing that there's yet another insect out there, because that white stuff is it being parasitized from the inside out by a parasitic wasp. Sorrel tree, Oxydendron arborea, is a beautiful tree from farther south, but you can see it's definitely getting eaten. That's kind of the bottom line for me. The definite tussock moth is also eating it. Tilia trifoliata is an interesting case because this really gets a little bit into climate change. So Tilia trifoliata is actually technically the trees are native to New York, but only just the tip of New York, like the southern tip of New York. So wafer ash is the common name, but it is proven to be hardy all the way up into our neck of the woods in the Catskills. It's also a member of the citrus family, the larger citrus family, and it's a host plant for the giant swallowtail. Well, in the Catskills, we have not really been getting giant swallowtails. I mean, they don't really come up that much. But lately, because of climate change, we've been seeing giant swallowtails. And here's one. This is what they look like. They're gorgeous. They don't usually stick around for a long time, but a couple of years ago, we had the giant swallowtail butterfly caterpillar on our Tilia. So that's probably a first for the Catskills for that particular caterpillar. This beautiful, I mean, we've already seen this, right? This is the we all know what this is, but do we know what plant it's on? It's actually on a Carolina silverbell. So Carolina silverbells are, of course, native to further south, but they seem to be quite hardy, and they're beautiful, beautiful plants, but they're hardy up into the Catskills for us. And as you can see, they are making a home for this beautiful, beautiful moth. All right, so I've talked a lot about what we should do. I just want to put this up, trees to avoid. I think probably almost everybody on this Zoom probably knows this list, probably knows that they shouldn't buy any trees or shrubs if the common name begins with an Asian or European name. Not that we don't want to be anti-immigration, but these trees do not do well here. That some of them are positively invasive. Now I just gave this list out last week on a Zoom call, and someone was asking me about Kuza dogwood. Well, actually, the Kuza dogwood isn't really very useful for our birds. It's monkey food. But in fact, the squirrels can use it. So it is starting to spread itself around. The worst ones are the pears. Don't buy any pear unless you can eat the pear. The Asian flowering pears have these tiny, tiny little pears that go everywhere and are becoming a terrible, terrible problem. It's such a problem that in the Midwest, actually, they have started to they've started banning it. Some of the states don't allow it to be planted anymore. All right, so I'm going to leave you with this. Haha, leaves are solar collectors. They transform the sun's energy to food for insects. Those insects provide the basic nutrients that support life as we know it. Thank you all very much. I would like to invite all of you to visit us. Our gardens are open by appointment. Here's my contact information. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, this is the new version of our book that Elaine so kindly mentioned at the beginning. Thank you, Elaine, for the plug, and thank you all for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carolyn. The photographs were incredible. All these wonderful caterpillars. We do have some questions. It's interesting because the questions you anticipated did not come up, which was very interesting, but others did. Mostly people want to know about oak trees. So
Okay.
let me go back. So which oaks in particular? I mean, we have many native oaks, and also considering that there is a disease that is affecting oaks now and affecting red oaks more than white oaks. If you can, so a couple of people wanted to know about in particular which oaks you most recommend.
Sure. Let me stop sharing here. Well, I guess I'll leave this up. So all of the oaks that are native are all going to offer the same suite of insects. So all of the oaks that are native will support over 500 species, if that's the question. We have many, actually, I did a whole rundown in the book on all of the different oaks and which ones are good for which types of properties, because there's over 20 species of oaks that you can choose from. We have so many. I just gave two extremes. I gave the red oak, which is very, very large, and the dwarf chinkapin, that's very, very small. And also there's bare oaks, which are actually almost shrub-like. So you can even find those. And all of those contain the ingredients in their leaves that the insects can use. Now, I don't know, I am not a plant pathologist, and I don't really know the score about any kind of, is it oak wilt that you're talking about? Yeah, we haven't seen it in our neck of the woods. I'm knocking on the wood of my desk as I speak. I hope that's not a problem in New Jersey.
Yeah, we do have it. We do have it here.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's awful. So I can't give you any information about how to deal with that, but I hope it doesn't spread.
What I'm seeing is that the trees in the, somebody had asked specifically about pin oaks, and I didn't want to go into that, but pin oaks belong to that red, they're either red or black. There's two groups
true.
of oaks. There are
There's the
white
red
oaks.
and white, red and white, yeah.
Yeah,
So
and then
the red
sometimes they're
oak,
called black, but pin oaks are in the red oak group. And the red
right.
oak group, they're all oaks are susceptible, but the red oaks are more susceptible.
Is that right?
Die
Okay.
more quickly.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
So yeah, so all oaks are good. I have never seen chickapin oak in the trade. Have you that I can
You
remember?
have to really look. It's
Yeah.
starting, I think, because oaks are now, trendier. Thank you, Dr. Ptolemy.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I think that some people have looked into that, and you can find them. Usually you find them small, but that's
Mhm.
okay because they have vast root systems and they're very difficult to transplant. So once you get it
Yeah.
in the ground, it's going to have to stay there.
Yes. The other thing is there is a list of native plant nurseries on the Native Plant Society website. NPSNJ.org. There is a list of natives only nurseries, both mail order and in person. So you can call them up, once the season
Yeah.
starts. There are not,
I mean, that's the
not that
best way
many
to
of
get.
them.
Yeah, if we demand these plants, then people will grow them.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Somebody asked if red buds are important as host plants.
Yes, so I showed several photographs of the insects eating the redbud leaves. So they're not considered keystone, and they're nowhere near as productive as, for example, the dogwoods. The dogwoods were, 120 something species. So they're more like in the maybe a dozen species use them, but they're also wonderful bee trees. So it's not, you can never like, there's always a trade-off. So you want something beautiful in your yard, that's a good plant to use.
I was interested to see your pictures of the red-leaved red buds, because frankly, green ones are hard to find.
Oh,
Everybody
yeah,
wants the
I
red
guess that's
ones, and
right.
I spec'd in the last couple of years in gardens that I've worked on, I spec'd red buds, because everybody wants red buds. And I always specify green leaved, and the contractor always plants red leaf. So, so I'm glad to see that. I'm not totally convinced, but I trust you.
I mean, I'm not a scientist and I'm not conducting a scientific experiment, right? I'm not planting them side by side the way they did in that experiment. But if I see one, I mean, I have both, right? So if I see the red-leaved ones have insects on them, I'll go and look at the green-leaved ones and see, well, can I get another picture? And a lot of the times I don't.
Yeah, we're actually, the Native Plant Society is actually working on a policy on cultivars to, it's hard to put all this in words, but the general feeling is among the entomologists and scientists among us, of which I am not a scientist either, but that the red pigments could possibly be harmful. So, and the cultivars are to be avoided, but I like seeing that. They are
I'm just not
very
seeing it,
pretty.
I read the articles too. I read the journal
Yeah.
article too. That's not what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I know. If you see it, yeah, I thought that was great. So in general, are straight species better than cultivars? Would you say that straight species are better than cultivars in general?
It depends on your goals. So obviously, if you're a restoration ecologist and you're working in a natural area, you're not going to use any cultivars. You're going to go with local seed collection, and you're going to grow the plants specifically for those areas. And if there's in fact a population of a particular plant already growing there, you're not going to bring in even another strain of the same species, let alone a cultivar. So let's be clear what we're talking about. We're talking about gardens. Primarily, a lot of us garden in a fairly disturbed environment, to put it bluntly. We're not anywhere near a natural area. So are they better or are they worse? Again, you have to take each plant individually. So some cultivars, like the one I showed, the hydrangea Haas Halo, actually in trials performed better. It actually attracted more insects activity than the other, the ones next to it that were open pollinated. So you can't just make a general statement that all cultivars are bad and all straight species are good one way or the other. It's just too complicated.
I had to turn my audio off because my computer makes background noises, so
Okay.
I'm listening all the time. One last question, which I thought this was a very interesting question. Do you need a lot of plants for the caterpillars to come? In other words, we all have limited space. We all
Right.
have, is it okay to put in just one? Is it, is there a lower limit? Is there, how should we think about this?
Um, if you want your own natural reproduction, you're going to want more of the same. What I talked about with soft landings really gives us the opportunity to put in a lot of different woodies in the same area, in a small contained area. So just as one example, we have tulip trees, we have birch trees, we have sweet gum trees, we have red buds, we have dogwoods, all and there are others too. I just can't think of them off the top of my head, but they're all in a very small contained area. That gives you a lot of diversity to play with. Now you can go the other way and you can have all of one, it depends on, really on what your goals are. But I like the diversity.
Thank you very much. I think that's it for our questions. They are mostly all along this, along the same lines. And I want to thank you very much for coming. This was delightful. And I hope it's not another 11 years until we see you again.
Thank you.
Or
I hope
12
to
years.
see you at our place.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody. We
Thank
will
you.
we hope at some NPSNJ events within the next month and at our meeting on March 12th, which will be Randy Eccles' annual visit. And she will be talking about oak trees specifically.
Hey.
Oh, yes. Yes. Okay. So good night, everybody.
Good night.